Last year, I was attending a technology conference with my business partner. And while we were listening to the speaker, he reaches over and he taps me on the shoulder and he says, "We have a problem." So I excused myself from the session and I stepped into the hallway. I pulled my phone from my laptop bag and I noticed that I had missed a call from the head of my security team. Over the next several hours, I sat on a Zoom call with my business partner, two of my engineers, the head of my security team, and an incident response engineer. We scrutinized sign-in logs, correlated logon and access events, and pored over user mailbox settings. Shortly after 6 p.m. that day, we concluded a 5-hour-long Zoom call and got to work on what is called a BEC report, or Business Email Compromise Report. This is the type of document that you want if you want to be able to prove that a proper investigation was performed by a recognized authority, so that any future legal issues that might arise from such an incident can be more easily dealt with. The FBI reports that since 2016, $43 billion have been stolen through business email compromise attacks. And even more worrisome is that the amount of financial losses have increased 65% between July of 2019 and December of 2021. In this episode, I chat with Jason Whitehurst, CEO of Futuresafe, an MSSP or Managed Security Service Provider, who caters to MSPs or Managed Service Providers to provide them with the necessary tools and processes to protect both themselves and their clients from the growing threat of cyber attacks. Jason will share several stories with us, including one that is particularly alarming, and will have you questioning whether or not you are truly doing enough to protect your business technology infrastructure. This episode will also explore one of the most critical tools and one of the most important hires your business should be evaluating right now. This is the podcast for hardworking IT people who love technology, cybersecurity, and access to the coolest new tech tools. Welcome to Legends of IT. Full disclosure, I own and operate an MSP, or Managed Service Provider business. As an infrastructure and IT generalist, I decided many years ago that I was unqualified to provide the requisite level of cybersecurity protection that my clients deserved. That's when I partnered with Jason and his team at Futuresafe. And to this day, it's been one of the best decisions I have ever made. Now, just a bit of backstory. Jason is the head of my security team for my business. So Jason and I have been working together for a very long time. And I trust him. I trust the work that he does, and I trust his team with the security of my company and my clients. So Jason, if you could just introduce yourself and tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I started Futuresafe, I would say probably 5 years ago. I was the owner of an MSP and lived in the MSP space and had a security team and was working with another provider that had a security team, and realized through some security events that nobody could handle at that time, that very quickly the MSP channel was going to need skilled and dedicated security people. And I felt like that MSPs who were strong business-driven MSPs who understood the business of delivering IT would recognize that a lot of them will want to do it with a partner.
Awesome. Yeah. And, I think you made a point there that I want to touch on just for a quick second. And that is that business-focused MSPs would recognize the necessity to bring in a team of security experts. And I think that's an important point, because so many other IT vendor company owners, business owners, MSP owners, however you want to refer to them, just are unqualified to be doing that without the requisite skill sets and experience, without having the proper cybersecurity people. And just because they have some engineers that know how to fix servers does not make them cybersecurity experts.
I could give you an example after example of us sitting in arbitration hearings or lawsuits where the MSP had made some disastrous decisions early in a compromise of a client that led to the loss of the necessary forensics data for root cause or for the insurance company to pay for it. I've sat in those incidents where the cybersecurity cybersecurity stack they had chosen was horribly ineffective, and the way that it was implemented without the proper amount of oversight, without the proper SOC, Security Operations Center, without the proper oversight with CISO level people monitoring everything that's done. Every day it's less effective than the day before. You have to have eyes on. Cybersecurity is one of those rare verticals in IT that, at least not in the near term, is not going to shed the human capital requirement for keeping things running effectively, smoothly, and to be able to pick up the threats that are there and to correlate all those pieces of the puzzle. Right now, it's still very human capital intensive and will remain that way for a while. And those folks have to be skilled at cybersecurity, not being an IT guy. Those are very different things, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think everybody needs to understand that IT people and cybersecurity people are two different animals, two completely different animals. The way you have to think, the way you have to act, the way you have to conduct your workflow, everything is just very different between these two different types of IT roles. They both fit into IT, but definitely not the same. Okay, now you might be thinking, this does make sense. IT people and security people are different breeds. The problem is, the vast majority of IT people out there either don't have the required security minds involved in managing their technology infrastructure, or they believe they can do it all themselves. Either way, this puts these business networks at great risk. What's like one of the craziest things that, most off the wall kind of things that you've seen in the world of incident response?
In the world of the MSP space, you're never going to know what you're dealing with. So we had an MSP contact us whose client had been compromised. Of course, he was terrified, didn't know what to do. And so he had felt like the right thing to do was to contact the threat actor himself and to try to negotiate a payment reduction, negotiated some arrangement with them, paid them himself because he didn't want to lose his client, I presume. Then proceeded to get confirmation from the threat actor that, yes, we really have deleted the files that we took, the intellectual property files that we took. And yes, we're no longer in the environment, we promise. And, oh no, you don't have to report that to the state of New York. And there are no HIPAA reporting requirements because, you see, we didn't really steal anything because you paid us and we deleted it. So it didn't happen effectually. And so the guy ended up being prosecuted criminally, because he paid the ransom, which there's clear guidance on who does that. He did not have breach counsel, and so he was not under the protection of attorney-client privilege. The effort that he undertook, and this is a critical part if you're an MSP listening to this, the effort that he was undertaking to assist with a compromise is completely outside the bounds of every MSA I've ever seen an MSP create or use. If it's outside the bounds of the MSA, none of the liability restrictions, none of the caps that are mentioned in the MSA apply at all. And so it was just ridiculously, it's not some crazy Russian hacker story. I got plenty of those. But I mentioned that story because it came from a smart IT guy who thought he was making smart decisions, doing smart things for his client. Every one of those smart things was the wrong decision. IT and cybersecurity are different. If you put a cybersecurity person in that seat and that happened, they likely would have made roughly the right decision throughout the life cycle of that event series. Not because one's smarter than the other, because they think and operate fundamentally different from one another. And I equate this all the time. I say, I talk to an MSP, oh, well, we provide our clients cybersecurity and, we're pretty good. We're okay at it. The other thing I get from MSP owners is, yeah, our MSP is pretty good. I think we'll have you do a pen test, but, I think we'll be fine. Won't be really good. I love it. We'll never get any findings were good, because that's never the case. It's usually quite the opposite.
I want to stop for a quick second and mention something fascinating about the parallels in this story. As Jason mentions, many MSP owners do not believe that an MSSP like Jason's company will discover any critical vulnerabilities when it comes to their own security. Now, my belief is they're worried that if the vulnerabilities are discovered, it would mean that they aren't truly qualified to be providing these security services to their clients. And this is really important because many of these MSPs are the ones responsible for the security of businesses like medical practices, pharmaceutical companies, manufacturers, and even those businesses responsible for protecting the security of our country.
But with that being said, they're doing their own cybersecurity because they've been inundated with information from folks who want to sell them something or another. That you can do it, and it's fine. Do it yourself. From a compliance perspective, it might even become, you might not be able to be doing it legally in some states, and for sure. But my whole point in that was saying, would you ask a SQL developer, would you hire a SQL developer to be a server administrator? No, that's stupid. There's a bigger difference between. So, that's why I tell that story a lot, because God tried to do everything he could to help the client, and what his IT mind says was the right sequence of decisions. And it was devastating for him and his business. He was not a small MSP. He's probably a $3 million MSP. He's working for somebody else now and has been since that event.
If you're an IT person or business owner, you might be wondering, how can I know if or if you have an MSP, if my MSP has the right tools in place to be able to survive an audit or a cyber incident insurance claim?
So what would you say is the most important tools that an IT vendor or an MSP, or even if you're talking directly to the small business themselves, what are the most important cybersecurity tools they should have, not just to protect themselves, but in the event that there is some sort of a breach, that they can prove to a forensic examiner, or if it's an audit, that they can prove to an auditor that they've got the requisite data to be able to show how this attack took place?
So let me talk really quickly to help folks if you don't live in this space. SIEM is Security Incident and Event Monitoring. Okay, it is a passive methodology that gathers and aggregates log data from a multitude of sources and algorithmically risk compares that data where possible to result in some type of alert or some type of peak in a chart or, a real-time graph, something to help the SOC guy know, hey, you need to look at this thing over here. That's a SIEM. Now, a SOAR can be deemed the next iteration of SIEM, right? And that's security, orchestration, automation, and response. So if we look at that terminology, orchestration of data, that's another way of saying SIEM. Right? Automation is automated alerting, automated contextual alerting. Response is the ability of that platform to make a machine learning or AI or rule set based decision to take action. So a SOAR is actionable. And there is a big difference in when one is looking at one or the other. Now, SIEM did not used to be in the lexicon of things that we felt were critical for an institution in their cybersecurity budget spend. It was MDR.
Why is that? Why is that?
Because it wasn't as commoditized as it is right now, so it was significantly more expensive than it is these days. I think because most of the SIEM providers were pricing based upon gigabits of data ingestion, and who can predict what that cost is going to be? The answer is nobody. And so it's unpredictable costs, very high spend entry points for these vendors. They were not operating in the channel, not dealing with SMBs, and so you would have a significant amount of spending just to get a product like that, and be well above the actual amount of resources that you used. So there was basically nobody was building either a price model or a platform for the SIEM market. I can tell you that every ransomware case that we've worked with, either because of an impacted MSP or their client was impacted, there's just not a single one of those that did not utter these words. I wish we had the SIEM we'd been talking about, because a lot of data was missing that would have helped not only get the right answer as to what happened, but made it a lot more affordable, because when you have all of the data, it's much more cost effective to find the answer, much less costly to find the answer than if the forensics team has to try to put the storyline together.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. I can't tell you how many conversations I had with various businesses where when we talked about SIEM, it was always something, like you said, that just seemed unnecessary. Well, that's really expensive, and I don't think we really need that. We've got a good antivirus. We've got a good training program. We've got a good firewall. I think we're okay. That seems like we're doing everything we should have to do. And to make that kind of a spend seems ridiculous. And that's always true until there's an event. Mm-hmm. And then when the event takes place and they say, hey, we need to work with our attorneys to figure out what took place and who did it and how it happened, and we're pointing the finger at you, Mr. MSP, that gets exponentially more difficult without that information in those events.
Before we go on, it's important to mention that Jason works hundreds of ransomware cases every year, so it's safe to say that he's seen his fair share of cyber incidents. One of the most important details to be aware of when it comes to ransomware cases is something called dwell time. Dwell time is the length of time that a malicious actor spends in a victim's environment before they are detected. Now imagine coming into work every day, logging into your email, accessing your files, and going about your business, all while a cybercriminal is lurking in your network, stealing your data, and just waiting to strike. The story that Jason is about to share is about a business that had already been compromised and didn't even know it. The attacker was inside the network, and not even antivirus was able to stop them. If it hadn't been for the SOAR, Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response platform that they put in place, this particular story would have had a completely different outcome.
The average dwell time of a cybersecurity incident, dwell time meaning the time between the compromise and notification and identification of said compromise, in an environment without a SIEM or SOAR platform, is 43 days. Remains 43 days. The number has not come down substantially in the last year. The average dwell time for a SOC managed is a big difference. Not just having a SIEM and not nobody looking at it, or getting threat fatigue and sending all those emails to a folder. SOC managed SIEM, the average dwell time is approximately 3 hours for a SOC managed, appropriately configured SOC managed SIEM. For SOAR, it's even less than that, because the SOAR platform, in a number of instances, can take blocking and tackling efforts, while the SOC vets and manages what the risk is. The SOAR is just going to say, well, I don't know if that's good or bad, but that fails a whole lot of criteria, so I'm just going to block its ability to communicate with anything until somebody tells me what to do. And so significantly less than that. And the damage is mitigated. The amount of data that's exfiltrated and lost is significantly reduced. Every day that threat stays in place, the cost of that threat goes up precipitously as it relates to cost and fine levied on the compromised environment, because of emails continuing to be exfiltrated out of the environment and identification of those, right? And so there's a real number attached to that. As a matter of fact, insurance companies are starting to require SIEM. We've seen that in the last 6 months. We've seen that more and more frequently, where that's a requirement for a cyber policy. It didn't used to be. It used to be highly recommended. Now it's a part of the minimum requirement.
Well, I mean, sure. Think about it. 3 hours versus 43 days. That's a huge difference. The amount of damage, the amount of data exfiltration that could take place in the 42 days and 21-hour difference that exists between those two measurements of time is astronomical. And if you think about a healthcare practice, that each one of these records is going for $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 a record on the dark web, that's gold. The more they can retrieve, that's gold. And I think on the flip side, it's really important for anybody who works in healthcare to understand what the fines are attached to each one of those records and what the legal disclosure requirements are when something like that happens. So listen, I mean, SIEM makes a ton of sense to me. I've been pushing SIEM for a long time now, but I'd love to know, like, with all these things that you've seen, has there been a time in the recent past where SIEM just really shined and saved the day in an incident response scenario, different than you'd seen before?
Yeah, and it has, and I'll even narrow that down a little bit into not just SIEM, but why. So we get caught into quite a number of compromises, ransomware cases. And a lot of people don't know this, but ransomware, the term, covers a wide range of compromise types and sources and that type of thing. A lot of people think they encrypted my machine and they demanded a ransom. That's ransomware. It is, but it's far from the only compromise that's deemed as such. So we received a call from an existing client who had a friend who ran a water treatment plant, and they had been compromised, and they weren't encrypting machines and demanding money. They basically said, we have complete control of your PLC network to be able to either turn off the water to the city or to dump chemicals or do whatever we want.
Let me explain this term real quick. PLC stands for Programmable Logic Controller. It's essentially a small computer that gets used in manufacturing processes like assembly lines, large machines, or robotically controlled systems. In this case, they were used to control large machines that were part of a water treatment plant.
And to prove it, we'll shut off one of your pumps, and we have complete control of your business network. And you better pay us right now because we're out of time and patience, and we will do something about it. So obviously we were called, and it happens every time. I tell this story a lot where we get called in to deal with an MSP that's been compromised, right? And it's the same thing, and it's painful to watch. The owner of the MSP is in his office with the door closed, calling all of his clients, explaining what happened, while his employees who need him the most at that very moment are trying to figure out the steps to take to save the business and to help clients and their engineers. That's not their job. And so in this unique scenario, it was, the MSP owner, who's not a cybersecurity person, who didn't know anything about cybersecurity in depth, who didn't know anything about what to do in a compromise, called us because he was an existing client. The water plant was not our client. It wasn't a client of his. It was a friend of his. And so we just said, okay, we'll jump on it. We'll figure out the billing part later. So we immediately began the blocking and tackling and do what we do. And we put in a product that told us what IP addresses were coming and going, whether those IP addresses were malicious or not, and what was talking to those IP addresses behind the firewall to quickly determine potentially what the root of the problem was. And it did say that, yes, there were multiple IP exfiltration attempts to a certain IP address. We said, okay, cool. What internal IP addresses was it connecting to? I don't know. I mean, you don't know. I don't know. Okay, hadn't seen that before. So we got the vendor involved, and we're trying to work through it, couldn't figure it out. So we called in the forensics team, got the breach attorney involved. Always start there. Got everybody covered on attorney-client privilege, called the forensics team in as a favor. They came in to try to understand what was going on. After about 4 days, they said, hell, we don't either. And that was scary because nobody knew. So when the forensic...
So wait, let me just ask. So you're sitting here looking through this network, you're analyzing logs, you're looking at machines, you're looking for indicators of compromise, and you can't, after 4 days of multiple people working on this environment, nobody can figure out where this threat actor is or how they got in.
Not even me. Multiple people on my team and my business partner with 3,000 ransomware cases under his belt.
Wow. Okay, so what happened next?
So we did the only thing that I thought we could do, which was to call our SOAR vendor. And a lot of SIEM and SOAR products, they come with agents and they have agent connectivity, and that's it, right? That is a SIEM and that is a SOAR. However, that is far from a truly effective SIEM and SOAR platform. It'll work and it'll give you data, but it's missing a whole bunch of the story. So we called our SOAR provider. Well, we've highly customized it. It's ours. But we called the vendor who provides us the majority of that platform, including the SOC. And we said, hey, man, I need you to ship a hardware sensor, because we use hardware sensors. And in these environments, we use hardware sensors between the circuit, or between the firewall and the first layer 2 switch, or the first layer 3 switch. But that's because it collects every packet that moves in the network, and out and in at the packet.
Right.
And so they did us a favor, shipped one overnight, got it there, and within an hour, we were given a storyline after doing that.
1 hour. Once that product got in place, 1 hour.
Including a PCAP sensor, yeah. So again, once I was in place, we got a storyline in an hour. And
wow.
That was...
After 4 days of hunting with all of the existing tools, and once the SIEM and SOAR got installed, 1 hour to track it down.
Yeah, and it wasn't about data aggregation for them. It was about the level at which they were able to see the data and make determinations as to what it was doing.
Yeah.
In this case was...
So I think, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea here. I think the thing that might be in somebody's head is, great, if we get into one of these situations, we can just call a SIEM vendor and they can come down here, throw it into the network, we'll pay a few bucks, and then we can get it out of here and not pay these high monthly fees. But why can't they do that?
Because that's not their business model. We have a very deep relationship with these people, and we've brought a lot of clients their way that are our clients that we have this shared platform with. And they did it because in this particular scenario, because I'm a client, and I spent a lot of money with it. Yeah. They wouldn't have done it. They wouldn't have done it, and I wouldn't have done it in any other case, right? I mean, we're all being honest here. The right question is, what's most effective of the tool sets available to me, roughly within the confines of my budget, to give me the best possible security outcome? Best possible outcome that does not only mean you don't end up with a compromise. It means if you are somehow compromised, that you have all the data you need to immediately or as quickly as you can eradicate said compromise. When one buys a house and you hire an exterminator, it doesn't mean you'll never see a spider again, right? It means... and that's the same way nobody can guarantee somebody won't be compromised. That's not true. I had a banking client that was as close as I'd ever seen to being able to say that it was guaranteed, because he only used the internet for 30 minutes a day. He unplugged it the rest of the day. It was a very small place.
Yeah.
He plugged it to get updates from the FDIC and to send out the financial transactions for the day. And I only had to protect that half-hour window. That's about as close you can get.
It's still not 100%.
But point being, I think the real thing to remember if you're listening to this podcast, does one, whether it's the business owner or the MSP, if you're the MSP owner, you really should be listening to this statement. Do you have the cybersecurity expertise to look at every one of those log sources independent of one another and algorithmically or intellectually make a comparison to link disconnected events that show that there's something going on, and be able to put those pieces of the puzzle together? Because that's what a SIEM and a SOAR does. And the more data you can feed it, the better it gets, not the other way around.
Yep.
Being able to look at all of those different components and to have machine learning, AI, algorithmic risk comparison and analysis, algorithmic risk detection, comparison, analysis, better tools do better jobs of that. Having hardware collectors that collect at the packet level is proved to us time and again lately as being necessary, not just because that use case when we found it, by the way, with the hardware sensor was because they were operating IPv6 and using some other technologies that the tool sets that we had to pick it up weren't looking at IPv6. And they weren't looking at things like NetBT, which is what these guys were using to navigate. And so they missed it. The hardware sensor doesn't care. It looks at it at packet level, and they picked it up right away. So point being, that's why they're so much more critical, because the amount of data that one has to ingest is increasing, not decreasing. The tools one needs to look at are becoming more complex, not less. And the necessity to be able to quickly analyze that data and make a risk determination is becoming more important to do it quickly, not statically or less important. So all of that goes to why one should look at a SIEM or SOAR, particularly one that has hardware collectors in its.
Awesome. Yeah, love it. I love it. I hope somebody can learn from that and open their eyes to the possibility of SIEM and why it's necessary. Listen, is there anything else that you would like to say that you think would be beneficial for the listeners of the show, MSPs, small business owners, IT directors, that you think they could benefit from as it relates to SIEM and cybersecurity?
A CPA doesn't give you financial investment advice for a reason. Okay, my CFO doesn't do our taxes because that's not what he does. So you asked me that question. You asked me the question, is there something I want to say to everybody? I think it comes down to this. When it comes to cybersecurity, try your best, if at all possible, to work with an expert or a team of experts. So I would just say, whether you're a small business owner or whether you're an MSP, when it comes to cybersecurity, the differences are so great that it's important to partner with people who do just that. It will be better for everybody, and long-term will be more cost-effective than trying to do it yourself.
Awesome.
I run an MSP, and while I consider myself a highly competent engineer and technology generalist, I would never consider myself to be a cybersecurity expert. That is why I hired Jason and his team at Futuresafe to be the security experts that my clients deserve. As you heard Jason explain, there is more than one type of IT person, and that's an extremely important detail for everyone to understand. And it doesn't matter if you're an IT vendor or an IT manager or CTO or even a small business owner. Being a great IT leader means understanding the distinction between IT people and security people, and hiring the right people for each specific job. While it may sound self-serving, I'm a big believer that every IT vendor, short of building and managing their own security team, is unqualified to properly handle the cybersecurity for their clients. Additionally, small business owners and IT managers who are faced with choosing the right tools and systems for their business first must understand and evaluate the risks that their business is facing. A huge thank you to my guest today, Jason Whitehurst, CEO of Futuresafe. If you're an MSP and you're interested in working with Jason, you can reach out to him through his website at futuresafe.co. That's futuresafe.co.
Thank you for tuning into our show today. We sincerely appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Legends of IT wherever you consume podcasts. This way, you'll be notified as new episodes become available. Until next time on Legends of IT.